Welcome to Living Yoga. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast and video series, I love to interview people who are smarter than me about all things yoga, mindfulness, and wellness. And today I'm going to be chatting with Sarah Ezrin. She is the author of The Yoga of Parenting, which is a book I wish I had when I became a parent. But I got the second best thing. I got to be interviewed for the book. So I have a very intimate love for this book Sarah has written. And we're going to be talking about the stressful nature of parenting today and how yoga can be a potential help for a lifeline for those of us who are hopefully ushering little ones into big people without too much wreckage along the way. So Sarah's website is sarahezrinyoga.com, and her book, The Yoga of Parenting, and you can follow her on social media and contact her through her website. And I'll put all of that in the show notes below. I also recommend you check out one of her classes or workshops in the Bay Area and beyond. If you'd like to reach me, darrenmain.com, or you can just drop something in the comments. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, Darren. Should we tell them all this is take two? This is actually...
Yes, take two. We recorded this one. This is
in like May. Yeah.
The first rule of parenting is whatever you think your plans are, throw them out the window.
Well, first of all, we had to reschedule that one too, because I think Jaden had to get picked up. So that one was a whole thing. And then the whole thing got lost. But anyway, it's all meant to be. And here we are. And thank you very much. It was a beautiful intro.
When I'm not a parent, if I'll how productive will I be as a person again, now that I've had to learn how to be so efficient with my time?
I will say I've traveled recently by myself for the first time since my first son was born. So we're talking 4 years. I got to go to Montreal, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had so much time during the day. I was done with everything. It was 11 a.m. I'd already worked out. I'd already, done some work. I'd already explored the city. I'd walked the entire city, and I'm standing there twiddling my thumbs. It's amazing how much extra time you have. And then, of course, I FaceTimed my kids for the next few hours.
Well, let's dive into both your book and just parenting in general. You, like me, are a yoga teacher, and like me, you are a parent, and like me, you are probably aging prematurely because of being a parent. And you decided to not just do something for yourself, but to do something for other parents out there in writing this book. So before we dive into some concrete tips parents can use to sort of stay somewhat grounded as we walk this path we've chosen, I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit about what the book is and, what people might find, just a quick overview of what they might find in its pages.
Well, in addition to your amazing story, and thank you again for sharing your time and your story. So I think we have to talk about what motivated me to write the book in the first place, which is that many of the parenting books that I was reading were actually making me feel worse about myself. I found that they were really prescriptive. Most of them were behaviorally focused. So it was less about what was happening for the parent and much more this is how you change this in your child. And because they were prescriptive, a lot of them would come with literal scripts of how you would have to do things or steps. And I was already suffering from postpartum anxiety, pretty severe, with my first son. And I was where is the book that's giving me permission? Where is the book that's holding space like we do as teachers? And, you and I both even hesitate to use the word teacher because it is about space holding as opposed to telling. And I just had this aha moment that was this is my opportunity to get to create this. And that was why I got to interview people like you and so many other parents and parents of kids of all ages and parents who are in completely different family structures, right? Because as we know, family is not just one way, is that I wanted to bring all these different perspectives as well as yoga philosophy, modern research, which now is basically just confirming everything the yogis have known for however many thousand years, and put it into this one source so that when people go to read a book about parenting, they actually they're being guided towards their own answers and being reinforced and validated for the choices that they've been
Yeah.
making.
You know, one of the things I love about the way the book turned out is I think a lot of times in the yoga world, and this Instagram has made this 100 times worse, is that we present the idea that to be a yogi is to be perfect, to do the
Mm.
perfect pose, to have the perfect body, to look a certain way. It's very performative now, and I think that can be very, very toxic. And I think this the same is true for parenting. It's like you read most parenting things and it's like you're supposed to have the perfect meal, it's all organic, and
Yep.
the kids never see a screen, and you know everything is just perfect and you look like you just stepped off the cover of a magazine.
Yep.
And none of that is even remotely realistic, and so we wind up, instead of yoga and things that are supposed to inspire us, lifting us up and giving us permission to just like fall on our face and be okay with it, we feel shame.
Yep.
And your book really taps into that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to feel stress, it's okay not to be perfect, just as it's okay to fall out of tree pose and it's okay not to touch your toes or to take shavasana earlier, come to child. And I just love the way you gave me as a parent permission to be a hot mess. It was affirming.
It's, so my friend Caitlin Soleil actually wrote the book A Little Less of a Hot Mess, which is, and
Mhm.
she's a licensed therapist and hers has a parenting bend to it. So that title was already taken. I actually wanted to call the book The Perfectly Imperfect Parent. That was my original title when I was pitching it around. We ended up using yoga because that's what made it a specialty project, and full honesty, the word yoga sells. But I also think there's a huge misconception in the West of what yoga is, and not just what yoga is, but what is important and what success is. And there's so much looking outside of ourselves. So it's that like perfectly plated meal, and everything's all done. And the only reason I'm even all done right now is because I had a special event yesterday. Like most days, it's just a mess. Is that it's all about what the appearance is to people. What are we showing people on the outside? But we know, having had these decades long yoga practices, that it's an internal experience, and that yoga
Yeah.
happens within. And I think parenting happens within too. That's the part that gets missed. Everyone's looking outside at what are the kids doing, what are the metrics. We're in such a it's like meritocracy, right, where everything's about grades and colleges and GPAs, but nobody's looking at what's happening on the internal space.
Yeah.
And that's
You
what was missing. Yeah. So that's what I was hoping to remind us of, right? Because we all know it intuitively.
yeah. I was just at my son is getting ready to go to high school, and
Yeah.
I was just at I'm trying to decide, does he go to a private school, a charter school, a public school? Major decision for the rest of his life, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm touring different schools and listening to all of these speeches about how my kid is going to be amazing if he goes there. And in one of them, they were going around and they were just asking, what are your hopes for your child? And most people that they become successful, that they get into a good college. And I was like, that he be happy.
Yes.
Like, I don't even know what that looks like because I haven't totally found it for myself. But yes, I want him to be successful. And yes, I hope he goes on to continuing his education in whatever that looks like, college or just reading a lot of books or something. But I want him to be happy. And when you set the metric at, I want my kid to be happy and reasonably well adjusted, then parenting becomes a little less stressful because it's not achieving these impossible goals, you know?
There's a great book out right now called Never Enough. I believe the author is Jennifer Pierce. She's a journalist, and she interviewed parents for a couple of years that were at all these high achieving high schools and colleges, and was talking about this, right? That the pressure that they put upon themselves, the pressure that the kids put upon themselves, and obviously two very detrimental results. But, I fully agree with you. I think even we've been conditioned, right? Because even you saying the choice is going to affect him for the rest of his life is like, even you kind of have that, like the fear has even set into you in some ways. But the reality is, life takes these amazingly circuitous routes, right? And he's got his own path, and there is no wrong answer. It doesn't matter where he goes. He's going to thrive. He's going to find the right path for him. But we're being told that you have to pick the right school, and he has to be on this trajectory, and he must get this cut off.
Yeah.
And like, it feels like a noose around our neck, right? It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. And I love what you said. Like, if we can just remember that we're here to connect and to be present. And I don't even wish happiness for my kids, because I don't think happiness is sustainable, right? I want them to live full lives. I want their lives to be full. I want them to be sad. I want them to be heartbroken. Yeah. I want them to have that, because happiness and sadness have to, they seem to come together. But how do we fight against the culture, right? When the culture is what's breathing down our neck, and it's all around us. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. I think there's also this movement in parenting in general. I call it bubble wrapping your child, mm-hmm. where they never, like, anyone says something mean to them and it's bullying.
Yep.
Or they fall off their bike or all the playgrounds. When we were kids, the playgrounds were like something from the movie Saw, they were like death traps, rusty nails sticking out everywhere, but it made us stronger.
San Francisco playgrounds, by the way, because now living in Marin and like visited LA, death traps still. There's like metal slides that go. They're like straight.
That burn the skin off the back of your legs.
Exactly. There's some that are stone that kids are bringing like cardboard boxes to. Like, it is not for the faint of heart. Those like city playgrounds, but
yeah. So anyway, I think Buddhism 101, the first of the Four Noble Truths, is life is suffering. Mm. And we tend to think that we failed as parents if our kids struggle or have pain or have difficulty. And that's not an attainable goal. Life is suffering. They're going to skin their knee. Yeah. Somebody's going to dump them at some point. They're going to lose a job or be called a mean name or have to deal with a sickness that nobody would want. So anyway,
yeah.
My next question for you is, you interviewed a lot of different yogis who are also parents. Did you find a through line for things, or maybe three key nuggets that all these different types of parents seem to use to sort of survive, thrive, raise well-adjusted kids?
I mean, I wouldn't say that there was like one tool that everybody used, right? It's not like yes, you must come to your mat for 20 minutes every day and then you'll be a calmer parent. I think it was the redefining of what yoga is. That was the through line that I found through talking to everybody, was how much all of our practices, the physical practice had changed, but that yoga became this much deeper process towards connection. And even those of us that like, we've been raised, we know, right? It's like, yoga is not the poses, but we get very caught up in the physical of it. I think because that's the tangible. It's what we see. It's what we can move. But then when you have kids, you really experience like, okay, this moment of staying still during a tantrum, this is my yoga practice right now. This moment of, when there's a lot of chaos, I've got two very loud, energetic boys, and it is like, I mean, talk about if you're a hypersensitive person, like it is just nonstop, but then there'll be moments where everybody stops for a second. And like, if you could just ground in that for a moment, like that becomes the yoga. That seemed to be the through line that I found was, in all these different structures, right? I talked to foster parents and parents of 4 children, parents of 1 children, was that it was the redefining. And let's not even say redefining, because this is what yoga is. It was the remembering what the practice of yoga really is about. And not putting pressure on themselves to to appear a certain way or for it to be a physical practice, but really it becoming this all-encompassing life experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of the big struggles that you heard about that people encountered?
I mean, everything was very unique, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of the themes were similar. So, for example, I did speak to a foster mom who I don't even remember if it was originally foster to adopt or if that became the process later. I don't think it was because they didn't know if their child was going to go back to his birth parents. So there was the unknown of it, right? And having to show up to court every 2 weeks and having to do these supervised visits at a home, a home he'd never even spent time in. The unknown of it, that the uncertainty, the feeling like he was going to be taken away at any moment. And you're a foster dad. You're adopted your son too. Like you had that
I went
experience
through the same process,
in
and
the very
it's
beginning, right? And
emotionally harrowing.
and I remember, like, when I talked to her, and her name's MB, and I talk about her in the book, Mary Beth LaRue, is she was saying that her yoga practice was sitting in the courtroom, right? Like that was when her yoga practice was really being put to test. But he was given to them, and he was legally made their son. And you would think, like, okay, tied in a bow, it's all done. But she said, but no, I still feel that uncertainty every day. And not because it was
Yeah.
trauma from his early experience. It's just, that's parenting is uncertainty. You choose to care give and to tend to this being, and whether you carried them or not and they came from you genetically, or whether you took them into your life later, they are now your responsibility. It is literally your heart living outside of your body, and the uncertainty piece lasts throughout. And it was like, I was hearing the uncertainty piece from her. I was hearing the uncertainty piece from people that, were just given birth and were holding their babies. There's just a reminder of how temporary everything is. And I think we know it in yoga. We talk about prakriti and purusha and all that, but to see it in these kids, to see them changing before our eyes. Like, I can't believe when you and I first spoke for the project, you just said Jaden's going into high school. He was like in 6th grade or 5th grade or something. So it's like, whoa, so that, I think, was the biggest challenge for everybody. Was like, how do we show up presently, but also know that everything's constantly changing all the time?
Yeah. Well, I think a basic tenet of yoga, the attachment leads to suffering. And if you're attached to your kids behaving a certain way, or never having pain, or growing up to be doctors, or whatever it is your attachment is, you're in for a real rude awakening, right? Like, if I'm the best parent ever, my kid will never get in trouble at school, will never get suspended, like, whatever it is you think is going to happen, kids guarantee that the opposite will happen.
Yeah.
And the unexpected will happen. So it's like this constant reminder that you have zero control over your life. And yoga is about making peace with that, right? It's not about gaining control over your life. It's about making peace with the fact that you're rolling down a hill with no brakes. Good luck.
But I think a lot of us maybe used yoga as a source of control, because even though that is the intention behind the practice, I abused it, in my early days of practicing. I took it way too far to the extreme, where I was actually I got so caught up in the poses and so caught up in the, Ashtanga series and having to look a certain way and be a certain way that I started to actually use it to my detriment. But you keep coming to the mat and you keep aging. Right? I mean, I think that's like your body's changing whether you want it to or not. And then suddenly, heaven forbid, but it's like, I mean, it's the same tenets of Buddhism, right? Like, you're going to get sick, you're going to get ill, people are going to pass, and these things start happening. And then you realize, like, oh, I can't hang on to the poses in the same way. My body is totally different. My body was totally different after my mom passed away, right? It was like, night and day within a 24-hour period. My body was totally different after my first major injury. My body is obviously very different now at 41. And that was like where it was kind of cool to see, because originally in my 20s, I was like using the yoga to like hang on to the moment, right, as best I could. And then I realized like, oh, okay, no, things are changing. And it was happening on the mat too, as much as I was trying to use the mat as my place. And that's when, you know, you're really trying to look for that anchor within, or that anchor to something bigger, right?
Yeah, I was just talking to a yoga teacher friend of mine. You may know this person. I won't say the name because just that's their story to tell, but they've been around for quite a while, and within the past few years was diagnosed with Parkinson's,
Mm.
and it's like the slow decline of their body has been really, really difficult, and it, it's interesting to hear their reflection on even as yogis, we have this idea that if we do yoga and we eat and we shop at Whole Foods and we do all the things yogis tend to do, that we're going to be healthy forever and
Yeah.
that our bodies are never going to break down and that this is somehow permanent, this state we're at in our 20s or 30s or whatever. And none of it's all a lie. And our yoga, because we tend to be more healthy, if we practice yoga, I think we can live in denial a little bit longer. But I think parenting has a similar quality to it. I mean, every yogi I know that becomes a parent has these ideals about how they're going to be the perfect parent and do it right where their parents screwed everything up. And then reality hits them in the face. And it's like, okay.
I mean, I know like the joke, like I was the perfect parent before I had kids, right? I mean, in my
Yeah.
context, I didn't even want kids. I was like, oh no, not even gonna go there. I had zero interest. But then you do get into it, and I think it goes back to what we were saying on social media and these aspirational versions of what parenthood should be, or even thinking back to what you mentioned about, like our parents, right? Like, and I feel so bad because I am going on these podcasts and I'm like, and
Yeah.
then, but my, like, I think we're just all human. That's what I've learned. If anything I've learned about my past, right, is like so much forgiveness for my parents, that we're all
Yeah.
human. But how are we parenting in this moment? Because are we parenting the child that we were, or are we parenting the child that's in front of us?
Yeah.
And that's another like big piece of it that I think this is, this, thank goodness for the yoga practice, because it slows things down. It gives us so much more space. And I don't know about you, the thing that's given me the most space in my life is really my meditation practice. Like sitting for meditation is what it feels like the matrix. Like these moments become much more slow, where I can start to see like, oh, this is me being triggered because such and such happened when I was a little girl. Or it may not even get that far. It may just be like, okay, something's happening in my body. I need to take a beat before I can respond.
Yeah.
But there's so many layers to it, and it is always changing, right? One more thing really quickly is like, even attaching to our children or our role as a parent, like even that is fleeting, right? It's like that Khalil Gibran poem in The Prophet, when
Mm.
on children, where it's like they are not our own, even though they are, even if they look like us, even if they are of us. Everything is
Yeah.
constantly changing. It's the truth of nature, and I think it's why yoga even began, right? Because people were looking for answers for that. People wanted something to anchor into,
Yeah.
and there is something to anchor into, right? I keep looking up for people listening, because like this is where the divine has to come in, but it's so hard when you're a householder living in the world every day.
Um, so I have one question. I have many questions, but one more. Well, two questions, but I'm going to answer the first one. What is your number one piece of advice for parents? And the answer is by the yoga of parenting. And so, what is your second piece of advice after being a parent, after writing a book about it, after interviewing really good looking yoga teachers who are
Who
single
happen to
fathers,
live
single gay dads that are
in the East
parents?
Bay? Yeah, exactly. Who are single
I'm not thinking of any one in
fathers.
particular, of course.
to read chapter 5 and make sure that you skip to Darren's story. That is my advice.
Really, the rest of it's all just filler, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I like my best advice is that you know your kid best, right? You are the expert on your own kid. And yes, we do need experts sometimes, right? When there are like behavioral, mental health, or physical health issues, and we need experts to come in and to help guide us. But ultimately, you know your kids best. And
Yeah.
that intuition, there's a place inside of us that really knows the answers. And again, we do need guides. We can't exist in a vacuum. We need a village. We need advice, but keep tuning back into your gut and that will tell you what your kid needs. And if you can't figure it out in that moment, then maybe that's not the time to figure out the solution, right? That's the time to be in the discomfort of it, unfortunately, but that's
Yeah.
just part of the process.
Good advice. And I know I've said this to you in other venues. In the first recording of this, where we had a technical glitch. um, I'm really honored that I'm get to be part of this book, but I only wish it was written about 14 years ago, so I could have read it and been more prepared, because there are a lot of parenting books out there, and there's some good practical advice about, bedwetting and whatever. But the reality is, the best thing you can do as a parent is be mindful and conscious and compassionate, all the things yoga gives us. And and I sort of intuitively knew that, but it would be nice to know I wasn't alone, and to
Yep.
hear some other yoga minded parents sharing their wisdom to help remind me and guide me in that pursuit. So thank you.
I mean, thank you. Thank you very much. I think knowing you and knowing that you had a long practice, I'm sure you were doing this all intuitively, but you do bring up the point, which is the getting to know other people that are like-minded and that are going through the same thing as you. And that was a huge intention of the book, and specifically the book tour. So, most
Yeah.
book tours, like authors sit in front of a room and they talk about their book. But what I did that was unique is I went to all these different places and I did panels. So I was bringing parents that were prominent in the wellness community at whatever city I was in, and I would do panels, and they would end up, pretty much everything ended up being a circle. There was like so many circles, and I'm like, we lead teacher trainings. I'm like a big fan of the circle,
Just
but
like
that was my
preschool.
so what was that? My hope was like, look, recognize this person that you practice next to every day. Recognize this person that you happen to know
Yeah.
from preschool. You have all these connections, and let's have this opportunity to sit and talk honestly together. So that's what I mean,
Yeah.
that's the wave that I want to happen after the book is like, like, let's just all be real. Let's talk about what's really going on here and how our yoga helps us and how it doesn't help us sometimes, because being a human is just
Yeah.
hard.
I also think, as the world has changed, I think men and women experience parenting differently when things were traditional, not in a good way necessarily, but where men could go to the barber shop or whatever, and talk about the stresses of being a father, and
Mm.
women could sit in a sewing circle and share advice and give guidance and stuff. And we're sort of lacking that place where men and women and non-binary and trans people of every stripe can get together and say, this parenting stuff is hard. Do you have any advice? What was it
Yeah.
like for you? And I think we're just so separated from each other, from our, even most of us have moved away from our hometowns and whatnot, that a book like yours is extra important to fill in some of that gap. So thank you.
And that just reminded me something that you and I talked about on the last interview was like, I think we both did a call to the communities to create that, right? We know so many friends that own yoga studios. Like, run a mother's circle. I think dads in particular, non-binary parents, transgender parents, there's a lot of absence of spaces for those. You see a lot of motherhood content, a lot of mother circles, mommy and me this, mommy and me that. So
Yeah.
create that in your space, right? If you're looking for someone, then, go out and find it and, put it out on Craigslist, create a circle. You don't even have to it doesn't even have to be organized or in a space. You can just meet out for tea and meet out for coffee. But it takes a lot more work on our part, and it's more work, that's the last thing we need when we do so much all day long. But the benefits of social engagement, they outweigh that initial energy burst of having to actually leave your house and major introvert here. I know it's tough.
And maybe
but
that's your yoga class,
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, the book is The Yoga of Parenting by Sarah Ezrin. If you'd like more information about her, sarahezrinyoga.com. You can also connect with her on social media, and I will put links to all of that in the show notes associated with this episode. If you want to drop any comments or questions, we'll keep an eye on them and answer them as best we can. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, my website is darrenmain.com, and I'm also on social media, and I would love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for topics for future conversations like this one, or guests that I could have on, please let me know in the comment section, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Sarah, you're amazing. I'm so glad we're on this parenting and yoga journey together. And I'm really honored that you included me in your book. And I don't know what your next book is going to be, but I hope I'm included in that too.
It's the biography of Darren Main. No, I'm so grateful to you.
Page turner.
No, your story is amazing, and that's what was that was so cool. Was just real quick, and I know we got to go. Was talking to everybody and hearing all the different stories and the different layers and the different experiences, and not just the parenting journey. It's what led us there. That was really cool. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience with my 7,000 emails. Taking a picture of yourself in share pose, which I know you were thrilled about.
I'm just glad that never made it to publication. The most unflattering picture of me in the world, and I'm I can't believe I'm sending this to her to publish.
Well, it is available somewhere.
Somewhere. Keep it quiet.
Exactly.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Darren.
I will be talking to you very, very soon.
Thank you.